You criticize others. You get irritated by arrogance, by selfishness, by people who talk too much or feel too much. But have you ever asked, why does it bother you so deeply? Carl Jung called it the shadow, the part of you that holds everything you've denied: anger, envy, fear, even your own forgotten strength. And here's the truth: most people never see what you hate in others is what you've rejected in yourself. You think you're different. You think you're better. But beneath the mask, it's the same wound. You run from it. You silence it. But it doesn't go away. The shadow waits. And when ignored, it takes over. Not with violence, but through your choices, your triggers, your patterns. Until one day, you realize you've become what you once couldn't stand. This isn't judgment. It's a mirror. And this is where the real work begins. There's a part of you that you've spent your whole life trying not to see. It doesn't shout. It doesn't fight. It waits. Quiet. Ancient. Patient. This part holds every desire you weren't allowed to feel, every emotion you were told to hide, every part of your soul that didn't fit the image. Carl Jung called it the shadow, but it's not some dark monster you lock away and forget. No, it's the basement of your mind. And every time you said, "I'm fine," when you weren't, you added something to it. Every time you swallowed your anger, smiled through pain, suppressed your ambition because someone told you it was too much, or buried your longing because it didn't match the person you thought you had to be, you didn't let it go. You fed it. You fed the shadow, and it grew, not in the light, but in silence, in the background of your life, where it started to shape you not as who you wanted to be, but as who you had no idea you were becoming. That's the part no one tells you. The shadow isn't some villain waiting to strike. It's the part of you you've left behind. The anger that was trying to protect you. The envy that revealed what you truly desired. The fear that once kept you alive. The power you disowned so others would feel safe around you. You didn't kill it. You just stopped looking at it. And here's the thing. What you don't look at doesn't disappear. It becomes your reaction. It becomes your trigger. It becomes the voice in your head that whispers, "Why does this always happen to me?" The more you deny it, the more it runs your life. Not out of malice, but out of survival. The shadow doesn't want to destroy you. It wants to be seen. But when you refuse to see it, it finds other ways to speak. It shows up in the relationships you sabotage, in the dreams you never pursue, in the anger that leaks out in moments that don't make sense, in the shame that creeps in when you look in the mirror too long. And you'll think it's the world. You'll think it's them. You'll think it's just life being unfair. But it's not. It's you. It's the version of you that was exiled and now wears 1,000 different masks just to get your attention. And the cruel twist: the longer you run from it, the more it becomes you. Until one day, you wake up and realize you've turned into everything you once said you'd never be. Not because you're weak, but because you were never taught how to integrate what you've been taught to reject. That's the truth no one wants to face. Your shadow doesn't destroy you in a dramatic collapse. It devours you, quietly, from the inside out, through denial, through projection, through pretending. And the only way out is in, because what you reject becomes your fate, and what you bring into the light becomes your power. But this isn't just about inner demons. It's about how the shadow moves through your world, and what happens when you start to see it in others without realizing it's just a reflection of you. Look closely, not just at the people around you, but at the reactions they pull from you. Who irritates you without even trying? Who triggers something in you that feels disproportionate? Not just disagreement, but a visceral discomfort. Something in them touches something in you that you haven't named yet. It might be the loud one, the one who speaks their mind unapologetically. You call them arrogant, but maybe deep down, you've silenced your own voice for so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to speak without guilt. Or maybe it's the one who always puts themselves first. You call them selfish, but inside, there's a part of you screaming because you've spent your whole life putting others ahead of yourself, and it's left you empty. You think you're angry at them, but you're not. You're angry at the reflection. This is projection, and it's one of the shadow's most subtle, most devastating tricks. Because it lets you believe the problem is always out there when in truth, it's waiting inside. See, the ego has one job: protect the image. The story says, I'm the good one, the kind one, the fair one. But that story, it's fragile. So anything that doesn't fit that image gets pushed out and pasted onto someone else. You don't lie, so you hate liars. You're calm, so you despise those who explode. You're always understanding, so you can't stand people who speak hard truths without sugarcoating them. But here's what no one wants to admit. The reason it bothers you is because some part of you wants to be free enough to do the same. But you can't. You won't. Because you've spent your whole life building a character, and that character doesn't allow for contradictions. So the shadow steps in. It says, fine. You don't want to see me. I'll make you see me. In them. And just like that, the war begins. Not with them, not with the world, but with yourself. You judge, you criticize, you cut people out, all while believing you're defending some kind of moral line. But you're not defending morality. You're defending the mask, the one you've glued so tightly to your face, you've forgotten what you actually feel beneath it. And this is how projection traps you. It lets you stay in the illusion of righteousness while secretly keeping you stuck in repression. You're angry, but you're afraid to be angry. You're envious, but ashamed of wanting more. You crave validation, but you call others weak for needing attention. And so, every trait you can't face in yourself, you will eventually try to punish someone else. But it doesn't stop there. Projection isn't just about blame. It's how you build your entire worldview. You'll start to see patterns that don't exist. You'll assume intentions that were never there. You'll misread silence as rejection. You'll interpret distance as attack. Not because people are cruel, but because your shadow is filtering the world through its own pain. It's like trying to look through shattered glass you don't see clearly. You see your own fractures. And if you're not aware of this, you'll keep fighting ghosts, pushing away good people, picking battles where there are none, and wondering why life feels so lonely. But all of that is your unconscious trying to wake you up, trying to say, stop looking out there, the one you're fighting, is in here. And here's the good news: if you can recognize projection, you can reclaim what you've given away. You can take back the parts of yourself that you've disowned. You can stop blaming the world and start listening to what your reactions are trying to teach you. Because underneath every irrational anger, every resentment that won't go away, every person you can't seem to forgive, is a message. The shadow doesn't want to shame you. It wants to free you. But first, it needs you to stop pointing outward and start looking inward. And when you do that, when you finally see that the enemy you feared was a reflection all along, you'll stop fighting. Not out of defeat, but out of clarity. And that clarity, that shift from blame to awareness, is where the transformation begins. What you refuse to own eventually owns you, and it doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't knock on the door. It enters quietly, moves into your habits, your reactions, your relationships, until it feels like it's always been there. You ignore your anger, thinking it's the noble thing to do, but it doesn't disappear. It finds a new shape. It turns into sarcasm, silent punishment, explosions over the smallest things, things that have nothing to do with what you're really mad about. You deny your envy. You tell yourself, "I'm not that kind of person." But deep inside, you feel the burn every time someone has what you've spent your life believing you don't deserve. And over time, that envy, it turns to bitterness. A slow, quiet bitterness that poisons joy, yours and theirs. You suppress your ambition. Maybe someone once told you not to outshine others. Maybe you believed being humble meant staying small, so you buried your fire. And now it rots into self-pity. You watch others chase their desires, and somewhere inside, a part of you grieves the life you never gave yourself permission to live. This is what happens when the shadow is left to grow in silence. This is how good people, gentle people, sincere people become exactly what they swore they would never be. Not because they're bad, not because they're broken, but because they never learned how to meet themselves fully. They were too busy surviving, too busy being what the world wanted, too afraid of what they might find if they looked too closely. And slowly, the fracture spreads. You start to hear your own voice echoing the words of the parent you used to fear. You begin controlling others the way someone once controlled you. You shut down emotionally, just like the partner you swore you'd never become. You think you're choosing these things, but you're not. You're being driven by what you haven't faced. The shadow, unintegrated, unseen, has taken the wheel. And you're not even in the driver's seat anymore. You think you're in control, but you're reacting, always reacting. To a look, to a tone, to a memory that hasn't even happened yet, but somehow still haunts you. You don't see people as they are. You see projections, old ghosts in new faces, unhealed wounds in every conversation. And life begins to feel heavy, confusing, out of reach. You lose touch with who you were, not in one moment, but in hundreds of small betrayals, saying yes when you meant no, staying silent when your soul was screaming to speak, making peace where you should have drawn a line. Until one day, you catch your reflection not in the mirror, but in the way someone flinches when you speak, in the way your child looks at you, in the way your partner stops opening up. And suddenly, you realize You're no longer who you thought you were. You've become what you once ran from. The very energy that once hurt you now lives in you. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. The longer you pretend it's not there, the deeper it roots. The shadow doesn't care how kind you appear. It watches who you become when no one's looking. And if you don't face it, if you don't choose to meet the parts you've buried, then life will keep showing them to you. Through pain, through conflict, through loss, until you're forced to look. But it doesn't have to be that way. There is another path, one that begins not with judgment, but with awareness, with the quiet courage to say, I see what I've become, and I'm ready to come back to myself. And from that place, from that single moment of truth, the journey can begin. It doesn't have to end like this. You don't have to keep living as a stranger to yourself. You don't have to carry the weight of everything you've buried. The moment you turn inward, the moment you stop running, something shifts. It's not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself, but you feel it. A stillness, a silence, and then a question. What have I been hiding from? That's where transformation begins. Not with answers, but with the willingness to look. This path isn't poetic. It's not romantic. It's not the kind of healing you can post about. It's raw, unfiltered, and deeply human. Shadow integration isn't a concept. It's a confrontation, a quiet, sacred one. You sit with your envy, not to shame it, but to understand it. You ask, what is this showing me about my own desires? What part of me still believes I'm not allowed to want more? You face your rage, the kind you were taught to fear. And you ask, what boundary has been violated that I've never had the courage to name? You look at your guilt, not as a virtue, but as a chain. And you ask, whose voice lives inside this guilt? Is it mine, or someone I was trying not to disappoint? That's the work. You peel back the layers, one by one, until you find the child underneath, not evil, not broken, just unheard, just unseen. And you listen, really listen. You realize your anger isn't a monster, it's your spine. The part of you that learned to clench because your no was never respected. You realize your vanity isn't shameful. It's a wounded longing to be noticed, to feel worthy, to be chosen by yourself. You realize your fear isn't weakness, it's a memory. A signal that your body never forgot the time safety was taken from you. This is what the shadow holds. Not just darkness, but truth left in the dark for too long. And the more you bring it into the light, the less power it has to sabotage you. It stops needing to scream, because you've started to listen. That's when everything begins to change. Not overnight, not in one revelation, but in small moments of reclamation. You stop apologizing for feeling too much. You stop editing yourself to be digestible. You stop fighting for worth in places that were never sacred to begin with. And little by little, the parts of you that once felt dangerous become your strength. You stop calling yourself broken and start calling yourself honest. You stop labeling your shadows as flaws and start recognizing them as messages. You realize the shadow was never your enemy. It was your compass. the part of you that never stopped pointing toward wholeness even when you tried to silence it. And now, it becomes your map. It guides you through the fire, through the grief, through the memory of everything you abandoned just to survive, until the very things that once poisoned you become your medicine. Your shame becomes clarity. Your grief becomes compassion. Your anger becomes purpose. Your silence becomes sovereignty. This is not self-improvement. This is self-return. Not becoming something new, but reclaiming what was lost, what was hidden, what was called too much, and yet was yours all along. And once you begin this journey, there's no going back, because you've tasted something deeper than approval, something stronger than being liked. You've touched the truth of who you are, and no mask can ever satisfy you again. But something else happens too. The more you integrate your shadow, the more your world begins to shift. When you bring the shadow into the light, you stop reacting, and you start responding. You stop being ruled by the unconscious noise. The inner chaos fades, not because it disappears, but because you've finally sat with it, long enough to understand it. You no longer flinch at discomfort. You no longer explode to feel seen. You no longer shrink yourself just to stay safe. You see reality as it is, not as your wounds painted it, not as your fears filtered it, just as it is. And that clarity, it's not loud, it's not performative, it's quiet, but unwavering. Because once you've faced your own darkness, truly faced it, you stop needing to fear it in others. You no longer go out into the world searching for enemies to defeat, because the battle inside is no longer raging. You begin to see people differently. Their flaws don't provoke you. Their mistakes don't define them. Because now you know you've done the same, felt the same, fallen in the same way. This isn't softness. It's not tolerance rooted in avoidance. It's compassion born from confrontation. It's understanding that only comes after you've stood in the fire and walked out intact. You stop being bait for guilt trippers, for energy leeches, for emotional manipulators who once knew how to press your buttons. Because those buttons, they don't work anymore. Why? Because you finally see who's been pressing them all along and why you kept letting them. You no longer act from the need to be seen, to be validated, to be chosen. You've chosen yourself. That's what integration gives you. Not perfection, not a purified soul, but wholeness. You are no longer fragments. You are no longer divided against yourself. You are no longer ashamed of the parts that used to scare you. And in that wholeness, you find freedom. Not freedom from pain, but freedom from the illusion that you have to escape it. Not freedom from triggers, but the power to observe them without being consumed. Because emotional maturity isn't about being unaffected. It's about recognizing what your reactions reveal and choosing what to do with that awareness. You become still, not numb, present, not performative, grounded, not guarded. You stop chasing people who never really saw you. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You stop seeking peace in places that only ever offered you chaos. And in that stillness, something rises, a quiet, steady power. Not the kind that dominates, the kind that doesn't need to. It's not about being above the world. It's about being no longer trapped by it. The insults don't stick. The rejection doesn't break you. The praise doesn't inflate you. You're free because you're whole. And whole people, they don't live to be liked. They live to be real. That's the beauty of shadow work. You lose the need to pretend, to prove, to please. And what you gain is something you can't fake, something no one can give you or take away. Self-possession, clarity, peace, not as an escape, but as a foundation. And from that place, you begin to live, not react, not perform, not hide, but truly live. You've spent a lifetime trying to be good, trying to be safe, trying to be enough. And along the way, you left behind the parts of yourself that didn't fit the story. The anger, the desire, the fear, the fire. You were told to hide them, to clean them up, to bury them beneath smiles and silence. But those parts, they never stopped breathing. They became your shadow. And now you see, they were never there to destroy you. They were waiting to be remembered. Carl Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming whole, not polished, but honest, not perfect, but real. So let me ask you, which part of yourself have you spent your whole life hiding? And if you had the courage to finally face it, what would change? What would soften? What would break? What would heal? Let this be more than a moment. Let it be a shift. If something here stirred something deep in you, don't brush it off. Don't scroll past it. Sit with it. Tell me in the comments, what shadow did you recognize today? Not to confess, but to awaken. And if this kind of reflection speaks to you, if you're ready to walk paths no one taught you to name, subscribe to Echoes of Thought. This is a space for the ones who are done pretending, who are ready to live from the inside out, who are no longer afraid to meet themselves. Let's walk this journey together.